safe areas. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Man, I am so happy to be here because Rainy Daze is one of my favorite beers, and they make so much that I haven't had. Right here in Poulsbo.
Right. Well, you know, I've had their beer a couple times. I'm really, on their dark beers, I'm really impressed with the flavor profile and everything.
Hey, Bill, how's it going, man? Give me an elbow.
Nice to see you, Bo. How are things?
Good. How are you doing?
It's a good day when we're going to have beer.
Well, you're in the right place.
Excellent.
Rainy Daze.
All right, thank you. Well, you know, beer is generally made from four things: water, barley, hops, and yeast. But the secret is in the ingredients, and this is where we start, because when you're making wine, you have to work with what God's given you, you know, the sun, the microclimate. Here, everything is in the hands of the brewer. It's like anybody can have paint, but not everybody can paint a masterpiece.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you make a drinkable masterpiece, my friend. Tell us about your malts.
Quality beer starts with quality ingredients. That's one of the main tenets here at Rainy Daze. We've got malt from across the world, really. Some European malt behind you here from the United Kingdom. Some pure Idaho Pilsner malt. Some crisp Maris Otter malt. Just a wide array. And the different malts will give you different things, all the way from color to texture to flavor. And it's really the heart and soul of the beer.
It is. And malt, I'm sure all of our viewers know this already, but malt is when you take barley, which has been carefully selected, and sprout it. And when the sprouts get to a certain length, you put it in an oven and caramelize it, and that turns into the malt. And it can be done lightly, it can be done heavily, all kinds of things you can do with that.
Is that a term called the toast of it, or?
There's a few different levels of it. Kilning, malting, crystallizing, toasting. We've got a whole different array that I could show you here. So here's some Golden Promise malt, which is a very lightly kilned malt. I don't know if you can see that there. So that's a really lightly kilned base malt. And base malt is where you're going to get most of your sugars from. Then you can move on to the darkest end of the spectrum. This is a Thomas Fawcett black malt, where this has been kilned for significantly higher temperatures, longer time. But interestingly, all this barley starts out the same.
Yes. I like it.
Cool.
So what we have are malted whole grains here of barley, and then what do we do next? I think it has something to do with that pretty machine down there.
We're going to take this malt, send these grains into this contraption, which is a mill. So the second step in the process is to crush those grains to the point where they're going to mix in with the water and more easily release the sugars and separate qualities that you're going to want out of your grains.
The starches.
So
yeah.
we need to take these kernels and crush them, not into a fine powder flour like you would in baking, but a real rough crush to where it will break these shells. But we want the shells to remain, actually. The husks, as they were, not shells, are going to act as a filter
Yes.
in our mash bed. So we want the husks intact and we want the insides exposed. So we'll run it through this mill, which will then
go down through this tube, I believe, and
head straight up into that silver vessel up there, which is our grain hopper. And directly below that grain hopper is our mash tun, where we're going to mix those crushed grains in with really hot water to make what's called a mash.
cool. Let's take a closer look.
So the next step in the process after we get into this silver hopper here, we're going to mix all those crushed grains into this vessel, which is called a mash tun.
Have you got a wort working there right now?
That's a cleaning cycle. Nice for the film though. And you bring those crush grains and that hot water to a very specific temperature and a very specific pH, depending on what type of beer you're making, depending on what alcohol content, depending on what grain you're working with. That's a very specific part of the process and one of my favorites. On a brew vessel this size, we've got a paddle where we will physically mix the malt by hand, every batch.
And the starches are breaking down.
The starches are breaking down into sugars. Absolutely.
Wonderful, because after the sugar comes the alcohol.
So we're gonna create that mash and let it rest for a certain amount of time. And then we're gonna send that filter bed I was talking about, we're gonna collect those wort sugars through this system on over into this vessel, where we will fill it up to the tippy top as much as we can, as much as we'll allow for the beer style and what we're brewing, into what is called the kettle. And that's where those sugars, sugar water called wort, is going to boil. It's also where we'll add hops and boil down to the certain sugar content that we would like. And then we'll send it into one of these fermenters. High pressure vessels.
These are the big boys. How many of these do you have?
We've got 9 fermenters currently.
Wow.
3 30-barrel fermenters, 4 15 barrels, 27-barrel, and a 7-barrel. So all different sizes for different batches. The 30 barrels are biggest. That takes 4 of these brews to fill. So we'll brew a batch 4 times and mix them all in that one big tank. 15s by simple math are going to take 2 batches on this system. The 20 we can fit 3 batches in, and the 7-barrel we can fit 1 batch in.
Cool. Well, I understand you also have oak barrels that you age beer in.
Indeed we do.
Let's take a look, guys. So one of the things I'm noticing in the field is that bourbon barrel aged and barrel aged beers are really popular and expensive too. They seem like a lot of fun. What do you use these barrels for? What do they add to the beer?
Barrels add a number of things to the beer, depending on the characteristics of what barrel you're using, what's been in that barrel before, how many times it's been used, where the barrel came from. We've got multiple different types of barrels. In addition to bourbon barrels, we also have some rum barrels.
Ooh.
And we've got barrels of all sizes. We've got some wine barrels as well. And each one of those barrels is going to add certain characteristics, like I said, depending on what's in them. And also just the tannins and the character of the wood.
And in wine, they let the barrels warm up and cool down with the temperature because it pushes the wine into the oak and then pulls it back out. Do you do something similar with these, or do you keep them stabilized at a temperature?
As stabilized as we can. Obviously, it's an ambient temperature back here, and very much depends on the seasons. And they're also on those stands where we can wheel them out in different places. If we wanted a warmer environment, we could take it to a warmer environment. But for the most part, you know, these have been sitting here for a number of months to a number of years. Small barrel program, but something we're real excited to work on.
This is, I think, probably one of the things you have a lot of fun with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
We'll have some coming out this winter. Actually, this week, we're going to be digging into those barrels and see where everything's at. Hopefully add it to the tap list soon.
The whole thing about a clean pour is it will produce spores and different bacterias that are going to ruin what he's trying to produce.
Yeah, breweries are some of the cleanest places I've ever seen. And we just saw, I mean, this is wet from spraying down just this few minutes ago.
Absolutely. Very rigorous cleaning program. Floor scrubs weekly, daily. Clean the whole brewery, the outsides of the tanks, everything is very important to keep all of those risks at a minimum. Obviously, when dealing with transferring the beer or doing any certain thing where we're going to open any element of the tank up, sanitation is always of the highest priority. And sanitation all the way around is always the highest priority.
Well, I've been looking at this door here, wondering what's behind it. Let's take a look. Yeah, let's do it.
Come on in. This is where the beer's conditioning and getting one step closer to drinking.
So this is not just cold stabilizing. What are you conditioning?
This is both cold storage, and these tanks you see to the right here are all conditioning tanks, where the beer that we've taken out of the fermenter, it's done its fermenting process, it's finished there, it's been dry hopped sometimes. We'll then transfer that beer into these conditioning tanks, where it will sit for a period of time, depending on which. We have a batch of porter in that first tank there on the left. That's going to condition for up to a week, just to let all those flavors mold together and pull out the flavors that we want. And this is also where we will add carbon dioxide, the bubbles into the beer. And as you see down here, this is also where we will pull the beer from the conditioning tanks into kegs and to your favorite local bar.
Well, gotta admit, a keg beer, a mug of keg beer tastes better than anything out of a bottle or can. But I love your beer no matter what it comes in.
Well, it comes in many forms. It comes in many forms indeed.
Well, I love this place. And tell us about your tasting.
Well, this is what I would call kind of our secret hideaway. Wonderful space with a great feel to it, great flow to it. Here in the tap room, you're almost directly connected to the brewery, which is a great aspect for folks out to enjoy the brewery atmosphere.
Exactly. I mean, this is a real brew pub. I mean,
To a degree. No food, though.
wow.
Beers only. We have food offerings, but we do not have a full-on kitchen.
Well, nevertheless, this is beautiful. And I love the flow. I love the handcrafted tap handles. And I love the beer. I mean, what more could a guy ask for?
We have six.
Speaking of loving your beer, perhaps it's time we did some tasting.
I think it's past time.
All right.
We've got 16 beers on tap currently, including a Steiner house-made root beer. We also have white and red wine offerings, as well as hand-squeezed mimosas. So quite the array. We've got, Rainy Daze is very well known for IPAs.
Yes.
However, we have beers, solid beers, across the spectrum. You'll see stout, amber, blonde. You'll see Empire Porter. You'll see a Duke's Up Red. You'll see our Mind Funk White Stout, one of our cult classics, in addition to a healthy amount of IPA offerings.
I really want to try the Mind Funk White Stout because I haven't ever had one.
It's one of those.
All right. Well, this is, I have to admit, my favorite part of touring a brewery.
The best part.
Exactly. So what do we have here first?
Right there first, we're going to start on your right-hand side and your left-hand side. That is our classic Disturbing the Peace Hazy IPA. Very citrus forward in the
yeah.
taste and the aroma. Real soft body, contributed by flaked wheats and oats.
And Citra hops?
5 different kinds of hops in that one. So it's an amalgamation.
I love that.
Thoughts?
It's all of your wines, all of your beers have a beautiful balance to them. I mean, they're not attack at the front and soft in the end. They're well balanced, and this just carries you all the way through the taste sensation. I really like it.
Yeah, I agree.
It's one of the classics. And one of the things we should mention is that each one of these beers is an extreme team effort from start to finish. Starts with our brewmaster, Mike Montani, one of the baddest mothers around in the local brew scene. Built this entire place from the ground up out of his garage, starting on a very small brew system and blood, sweat, and tears to get it to the place where it's at right now. Now we have a crew of 3 to 4 in the brewery, including myself, 1 driver, and a few beer tenders. And every step of the way is a complete team effort.
Well, I think it really worked well.
Came out in that product.
Absolutely.
Man,
I mean, you guys are making massive inroads in the local beer scene. I mean, everyone loves your beer, and I'm among them. So what do we have here second?
Have you ever heard the term goat boater?
I have.
no, I've never heard of it.
You've never heard about the goat boater.
No.
Well, that one, speaking of the local beer scene, is one of the most popular names around in terms of Rainy Daze beers. You'll find it in many of the different local bars and restaurants around here. Goat Boater is a classic West Coast IPA. clear as opposed to the hazy that we just tasted. Again, an amalgamation of hops, an emphasis on balance. It's got a slight residual sweetness from the malt choices, but it's also got that classic West Coast combination of hops.
What's the IBUs on this?
IBUs on that one's running close to 60.
That's what I was going to say, 60.
Yep. As opposed to the IBUs on the hazy running closer to the 35 range.
I was going to say 40. Yeah.
Yep.
This is beautiful. Of course, I haven't ever had any beers that I didn't love, but I've only had 4 beers, so I'm hoping to change that today. What do we have next?
Next is a beer we like to call Mind Funk. I'll give it no introduction but that. I would invite you to sample the aroma and the taste,
Golden
but
color.
look at the color.
That color is beautiful. My goodness.
Very small effervescent.
Looks like a pale, drinks like a stout.
It does. It does.
Oh my God.
Consider your mind funked.
Does this see any oak?
It does not. Nope.
Oh, wow.
Potentially, maybe sometime down the road, we could do some of that. This is one of our cult classic beers that kind of catches people by surprise there.
Definitely knocked my socks off. I'm going to have to stop the camera so I can put them back on before we go anyplace. Wow.
So the technical term there is white stout.
Which I wasn't familiar with.
Absolutely.
I like it.
It's a very light colored malts, but again, the grain selection and the addition of cold brew coffee. I hope you guys aren't going to be spun up for the rest of your
That's
day.
what I mistook for wood.
There you go.
For oak. It was the coffee. Damn, I can't believe I missed that. Wow. I like this. What's the alcohol?
Alcohol on that one is a bit above 6. Right in that range. And then we'll move on to your classic stout. This one comes with the tagline, the name Hall & Oates. It's your classic oatmeal stout in homage.
And oats, when you're making a stout, add a softness, a sort of wider range in the spectrum of flavors. Tell me about it.
Absolutely the softness in the body character. You can use malted oats or flaked oats. When you're using flaked oats have really kind of come to an even bigger presence in those hazy IPAs that are everywhere. A lot of times it's the flaked oats and the flaked wheats that will give it that body and also tag on to some of the yeast and suspension creating the haze.
The kind of starches. Yeah.
Right.
This is very well balanced. That's unique to, I mean, all your beers are very well balanced. I'm just very
It's the name of the game. Yep. That brewmaster, Mike Montani, he's something else. And then to finish our tour, as I said, we just celebrated our 8th anniversary. So in homage to that, we couldn't have a big party like we usually do, given the guidelines. But we did create a beautiful beer, as we typically do. It's in the hazy vein, but it's a hazy double IPA with the name Hazy Eights.
Hey, like Crazy Eights.
Ah, the hits keep rolling.
And that is a Kill Bill reference.
A lot of references there. So this is a good swirl. This one, again, combination of hops. Utilizes some down under hops, Galaxy and Motueka.
Galaxy and what?
Motueka,
I'm not familiar with
amongst a few others.
Wow. Quite different.
Yeah.
You know, that is one of the lesser hopped IPAs that I've had because it doesn't slap you in the face, but it's right there.
It is there.
It's just kind of subtle, but still there. What are the IBUs on this?
I would have to double check on that one. I would like to say 8, maybe 88.
Yeah, I was thinking
Crazy
higher.
8?
I like it. Crazy 8, 88. Yeah.
No, it's you know, it's similar. It's kind of right in between the goat boat or disturbing range. Again, with that balance, the bitterness is there, the characters are there, but they're not so overpowering
Yeah,
that.
nothing slaps you in the face, but they all come together so beautifully.
Absolutely.
I am
Beer turned out
every
beautiful.
beer I taste of yours makes me a bigger fan.
Yeah. Me-
So we do.
Unfortunately, I haven't had your beer until today.
Well, welcome.
And you got me hooked, dude. got my hook.
That's how it works. We've got a great selection here at the tap room. We've got this Hazy 8 in cans. We're putting a lot more beer in cans these days, given the current climate out there. So we have 7 offerings in cans currently, in addition to the 16 on tap here, and you'll also find us out in the market.
Are you having trouble getting the cans for the aluminum shortage, or has that not impacted you much?
It's a balance. It's a balance. We've moved to grabbing them wherever we can and trying to find storage space for them, as opposed to waiting until the time where we're about to put in cans. We can monthly. So we're trying to stay ahead of that curve. Obviously, that's a concern. A lot of the supply chain, there's a lot of supply chain issues that are a concern that have been impacting the industry. A lot of things kind of changed almost overnight, sort of deal.
I know. A lot of people are struggling. I hope you're doing well. I mean, I can't think of a better, more pandemic-friendly place to taste beer than this patio out here. I love it. And I encourage all of our people to come here and visit Rainy Daze, because this is quite some good beer.
As far as taste and storing, bottles versus cans.
That's an interesting concept that I've been going back and forth in my mind. When when news of the can shortage first started leaking out there, I said, all right, let's go back to bottles. Difference there, storage in cans is, some may say, better because there's no chance of light,
Right.
which would affect the beer.
Right.
Even with the amber bottles, which is why most beer bottles are brown, you still have the chance of light getting in and light striking the beer, and that does create off flavors, as strange as it may sound. So with that regard, cans would be better for storage. A lot of people go back and forth between tastes better out of a can, tastes better out of a bottle, tastes better on draft. But most of the industry had moved into cans, both for that storage factor, and it's also a financial factor. Glass is not as inexpensive as aluminum is. And so you've seen many breweries across the industry moving into cans.
Well, and we've gotten past that initial reluctance to drink beer from a can, because we're not talking Coors here. But enough people have recognized the quality beers that people like you are putting out. So there's not really that stigma anymore.
Absolutely. And there's a wide array out there on the market, for sure.
All the better for us. Well, thank you for having us. I have really enjoyed this, especially this part. So,
Been truly an education.
Cheers. Thank you all for coming out.
cheers to you guys.
Rainy Daze.
And tasting the peninsula.
Here, here.
Damn, that's good. We were in Monterey. We went to a restaurant on Cannery Row, and they had a really nice wine list and a lot of aged bottles, were 750s and little split bottles. Well, the poor pauper I was at that time, I ordered a split of Lewis M. Martini Cab. It was probably 10, 15 years old.
In a split.
In a split. And that's what got me to lay wine down, because you had full body. You could taste that friggin' grape. You could taste all the components of the wine. If I had a vintage that was that year, it'd tear the roof of my mouth off.
Because back in that day, they vinified wines to show their best in 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Splits age at almost twice the speed of a 750, and 3 liters, half the speed. So, enough about glass. What do we have in front of us, my friend?
Same goes with beer. You know, conditioning is key. It's differing amounts of times for different beers. We don't have any lagers on tap right now, but those obviously condition for a way longer period of time than most of your typical ales. And then there's a certain amount of beers that you don't want a lot of conditioning to. What we have here is the last of our fresh hop beer from this year.
I love fresh hop beer. It doesn't have much of a life on it. I mean,
are
what,
at the
30
end of the
days?
season. Oh yeah, the quicker the better. So I wish you guys could have been out here, I want to say 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks to a month ago. Fresh hop beers include hops straight off the vine to the kettle as quickly as possible.
So when you boil your wort, you often add hops then to get the bitterness, but the aromatics disappear pretty much. And so then you add the hops at different periods, and by adding fresh hops at the end, you get that beautiful flavor that we're about to experience.
Nailed it. So this beer is our fresh hop strata beer. These strata hops came from Southern Oregon. We had one guy in the van grabbing the hops from the farm while the other guy was here starting the brew. As soon as the hops returned to the brewery, it was just at the right time to send the wort over the fresh hops and into the fermenter.
I love fresh hop beer. I really do. Expensive to make though, isn't it? Because fresh hops are probably a lot more.
They're a bit more expensive, and there's the time constraints and the travel involved. And it's also, like anything, it's the touch. Because it can go extremely right or extremely wrong. This one was exclusively the fresh hops.
Oh, really?
A lot of times brewers will throw some extra pellets, a little pop. Other hops that we brew with most of the time are pelletized or cryotized. But this one was exclusively fresh hops. The only hops were that came through the kettle, and the fresh hops that it went over. And it hit the fermenter, and we said, that's perfect.
But this is so beautiful. I mean,
color.
I just absolutely adore this beer. I did happen to bring a growler.
I wouldn't fault you for that.
No. But I'm so glad that you made this, because you made my day so much better.
Absolutely.
All right.
Beautiful.
And I'm not leaving any of this in the glass.